Duncan. This is a story about Duncan, the narrow gauge engine. Duncan used to complain about the passengers, but this changed when Scarlo told him a story about how Renee saved the railway. One morning, Scarlotti was in the yard being polished by Nancy, the guard's daughter. Scarlotti was thinking about his friend Reneus, who had gone away to be mended. "Reneus comes home tomorrow," said Nancy. "What? Tomorrow?" chirped Scarlotti. "I must look my very best. Please polish me some more." "You're just an old fusspot," laughed Nancy. Duncan was jealous. "Aren't you gonna polish me too?" he asked. "Sorry," said Nancy, "but I have to get the ice lollies ready for the passengers," said Nancy. "It's not fair," Duncan complained. "Peter Sam gets a new funnel, so Handle gets special wheels. Passengers get ice lollies, but I have nothing imperfect." Duncan enjoyed complaining and soon began to sulk. That afternoon, there was some bad news up the line. "One of Scarlotti's coaches has derailed," called Duncan's driver. "We have to go there right away." Duncan took some workmen to sort out the mess. "All this extra work," he grumbled. "It was an engine out." The derailed coach was in the middle of the train, so Scarlotti had gone to the top station with his front coaches. Duncan brought the rear coaches home. He sulked all the way back to the station. "I get no list, I get no list," he muttered. He arrived back just in time and for his own 4 o'clock train. But he was still sulking and wouldn't move. "Come on, we're keeping our passengers waiting," his driver reminded him. At last they set off. Shortly before the station, they came to a viaduct. Duncan ground to a halt. "I've had enough. I'm staying here," he snapped. And he did too. Scarlotti, he had to come to the top station and haul Duncan and his coaches to the platform. The passengers were furious. They burst out of the train and told the drivers and firemen and the guard what a bad railway it was. Duncan was still sulking. "Why should I have to work hard to pull silly old passengers?" he asked. But no one was listening to him. The thin controller was waiting for Duncan at the shed. "If you won't carry passengers, you won't get polished," he said sternly. "I'd rather be polished if I don't have to carry passengers," Duncan muttered to himself. But he didn't dare say it loud enough for the thin controller to hear. "I'm ashamed of you, Duncan," said Scarlotti that night. "You should think about the passengers, not yourself. Passengers are just a nuisance. They're always complaining," replied Duncan. "That's no way to talk," said Scarlotti. "We need passengers. No passengers means no trains, and no trains means no railway. I remember when Reneus saved our railway because he cared about the passengers." "Please tell us about it," said Peter Sam. Scarlotti began. "Reneus knew we had to keep our trains running or our railway would have to close. I was often short of steam, but but he always struggled to his station and rested when they got there. "I mustn't stop between stations," he'd say. "The passengers wouldn't like it." "Woof!" puffed Duncan. He had stopped on a viaduct and hadn't cared at all. One wet and windy afternoon, Scarlo, he continued, when the rails were down, Reneus was taking a full train, traveling home with a full train. "Ah, I got cramp!" he groaned. Suddenly, he hopped on the loneliest part of the line. His driver examined him. "Your valve gear is jammed, but we need to reach the next station. Do you think you can get us there?" he asked. "I'll try," replied Reneus bravely. So the thin controller sounded the rails. Some passengers pushed from behind, and Reneus jerked and began to move forward. "I'll get there or burst! I'll get there or burst!" Reneus muttered to himself. And he moved slowly along the track until finally he reached the station. "Thank you for getting us home," the passenger said. "We'll tell all of our friends what a fine railway this is." And so, you see, what a brave engine Reneus is, said Scarlo to Duncan. "Thank you for telling us about him," whispered Duncan. "I was wrong. Passengers are important after all." The next day, Reneus came home. The engines greeted him with a chorus of whistles, but the loudest whistle came from Duncan, who decided he should always put passengers first from then on.